So I want you to imagine for a second that you are just absolutely starving, and you're at this massive, incredibly decadent banquet.
Right, like food just everywhere.
Exactly. Food everywhere. Rich, nourishing, complex dishes, like every variety you can think of. But you are slowly wasting away. You are completely refusing to eat simply because you're stubbornly holding this empty plate, waiting for like one single, highly specific appetizer, an appetizer that almost never actually comes out of the kitchen.
Which is just a wild scenario to picture.
It is. But today, for this deep dive, we're looking at a deeply provocative essay that argues this is exactly what happens when men objectify women.
Yeah, it's a really fascinating analogy.
Now, before we really dive in, I want to be super clear with you, the listener, about our mission today. We are going to be navigating some culturally charged waters here. We're touching on gender dynamics, feminism, trans identity, and I want to state up front, we're not here to tell you what's right or wrong.
Right, we're not taking sides or, endorsing a specific political viewpoint.
It's exactly.
Our goal is strictly to impartially report the author's arguments. We just want to dissect the pure psychology of it to help you fully understand the author's perspective on why highly transactional relationships leave us feeling so completely hollow.
Because whether you've been on the receiving end of objectification yourself, or you're just intensely curious about human psychology, this text provides a really fascinating, almost an aha moment, I'd say.
Yeah, it really does. So we're going to explore the relational, the psychological, and the physiological costs of objectification. Specifically, what actually happens when a man reduces an interaction with the woman to, well, the mere possibility of sexual access.
And it's such a profound thought experiment, I mean, because it takes something society usually just dismisses as, I don't know, poor manners or a lack of social grace. And it examines it as a fundamental structural failure of human connection.
Right.
The premise we are unpacking today treats objectification not just as bad behavior, but as a map of an incredibly impoverished inner world. Okay, let's unpack this, because the author starts right at the core of that map with a very blunt statement. Something some men make openly, but many more communicate through their behavior. The quote is, "I'm only talking to you because of what I assume is between your legs."
Yeah, that's the core provocation of the piece.
But let me push back on this right away, just to play devil's advocate. A lot of guys might hear that and say, well, hold on. If I'm at a bar or if I'm on a dating app, the whole point is to find a sexual or romantic partner. Why is it impoverished to just be honest about my underlying motive?
I mean, that is the natural defense, right? It sounds logical on the surface, but the author argues that it completely falls apart under basic statistical scrutiny. Let's look at the actual math of that approach.
Okay, let's hear the math.
If a man is running a constant background process in every single interaction, like he's constantly evaluating, can I have sex with this person? The logic collapses immediately because women have their own sovereign preferences, They have their own high standards, their own criteria for connection.
Right, they aren't just vending machines where you put in a conversation and get sex.
Exactly. The vast majority of women a man speaks to on any given day are never going to sleep with him, regardless of his intentions. And furthermore, a huge percentage of women wouldn't sleep with a man who is actively objectifying them under any circumstances anyway.
Wow. Yeah, so the odds are just terrible.
They're essentially zero. So if his solitary reason for engaging in human interaction is this tiny, statistically improbable possibility of a transaction, what is he actually doing with his relational life?
He's living in that kitchen analogy from earlier.
Yeah.
He is spending his entire life pursuing access to something he is almost never going to receive. And because his focus is entirely narrowed onto that one rare appetizer, he becomes, like, completely blind to the incredible value that is actually sitting right across from him at the table.
What's fascinating here is the author's point that by spending his time doing this, he isn't just being rude, he is actively depriving himself, which forces us to ask the most important question. What exactly is he refusing to eat? If he's missing out, we need to understand the exact mechanics of that missed value. And the argument in the text is that this isn't just some vague, warm and fuzzy philosophical loss. It is a documented scientific and physiological deprivation.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting, because I want to pause and drill down into the science of this. The neurological dimension of authentic connection is where this concept goes from just an interesting social theory to totally mind-blowing.
Oh, absolutely.
The text highlights that human beings co-regulate. Like, our nervous systems are not sealed units. But what does that actually mean in practice? If I am sitting across from someone and I am genuinely engaged with them as a whole person, How is that physically changing my body?
It literally alters your baseline physiology in real time. So we possess mirror neurons in these really complex vagal nerve networks that are constantly scanning our environment for safety and connection.
Like a radar.
Exactly like a radar.
Yeah.
And when you have authentic mutual contact with someone who is emotionally present, your physiological states begin to sync up.
Wait, really?
Yeah, literally sync. Your heart rate variability improves, which means your heart becomes more adaptable to stress. Your cortisol levels, the stress hormones pumping through your bloodstream, they actually drop.
That is wild.
It is. Your brain waves can even move toward greater neural coherence. You are essentially borrowing their nervous system's calm to stabilize your own. And here's the major catch: co-regulation requires mutual presence and recognition.
So if I am reducing the person across from me to a function like, if I am just waiting for an opening to steer the conversation toward a sexual transaction, I am severing that circuit.
Completely. You cannot co-regulate with an object.
Wow.
If one party has reduced the other to a body part or a goal, the biological feedback loop of safety and mutual recognition is just broken. So the man operating this way is actively denying his own nervous system the chance to de-stress.
But wait, a skeptic might argue, okay, sure, I'll just co-regulate with my guy friends. I don't need to co-regulate with women I'm attracted to. Why does the author argue that the loss of authentic connection, specifically across the gender divide, is uniquely damaging?
Because engaging authentically across differences, and especially profound differences in lived experience, it builds an entirely different tier of emotional range. Empathy, self-awareness, all of it. The text breaks this down into 3 other dimensions: emotional, somatic, and intellectual.
Let's start with the emotional and somatic.
Right, so when a man genuinely interacts with a person carrying feminine energy, and we should define that, it acts as a direct developmental resource.
Yeah, let's clarify what we mean by feminine energy in this context, because the author is very clear it's not about superficial gender stereotypes. It's defined as a specific quality of presence, of receptivity, and of somatic grounding.
Exactly. It's not about liking pink or whatever. It has a physical transmission quality. The author points out that men who maintain genuine, non-transactional friendships with women frequently describe a somatic feeling of aliveness.
Aliveness?
Yeah.
What does that feel like physically?
It is a physical sensation of relaxing into being known. Think about it. When your nervous system is finally allowed to drop that hypervigilant competitive guard that society often demands of men, your body feels a profound sense of relief. You are finally resting.
Man, that's powerful. Which brings us to the intellectual and experiential value that is lost. Because women carry a unique intelligence simply from having to navigate a world that is frequently not built for them, right?
Yeah, and often actively hostile to them.
Right. And that lived experience produces a highly attuned perception, like a radar for social dynamics and safety, that a man simply cannot access through his own lived experience. If he's only looking at a woman as a potential sexual transaction, he is locking himself out of her brain. He's refusing access to her lived intelligence.
So think about the sheer scale of that self-sabotage. According to the essay, you are denying yourself empathy, somatic relief, physiological calming, and unique intellectual insight, all because you refuse to encounter the person in front of you as a whole human being.
So if the value of encountering a whole person is so scientifically and experientially clear, we have to look at why the gatekeeping happens. Like, why do some men still rigidly filter their interactions based entirely on anatomy?
Right, why throw away the banquet?
Exactly. And to explore that, the essay brings up a really fascinating reality check. The woman without a vagina.
Yes, this is where the underlying logic of objectification is really put to the test. If a man operates purely on the premise of, I am only engaging with you because of your specific physical anatomy, that logic automatically excludes a massive demographic of women.
Right. It excludes intersex women. It excludes women who have undergone hysterectomies or vaginectomies for medical reasons like cancer.
Exactly. So let's follow the author's logic here. If a man is having a deep, engaging conversation with a woman who possesses every single emotional, somatic, and intellectual quality that constitutes a whole person,
All the co-regulation is happening.
all of it is happening, and then he suddenly withdraws his engagement because he finds out, say, she had a hysterectomy and her anatomy doesn't match his template, what does that actually reveal?
It reveals that he was never interacting with her in the first place.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, It exposes the entire mechanism of his perception. The author concludes this proves the gatekeeping was never actually about the woman sitting in front of him. It was always about an imagined object held entirely within the man's mind.
The woman was never the point.
No, the fantasy was the point.
She is just like a blank screen. She is a prop in a script he wrote long before she even walked into the room. He is projecting a hologram over her, and he's just interacting with his own hologram.
And by definition, his fantasy has absolutely nothing to do with her actual body, her lived experience, or her humanity. He is effectively having a conversation with himself, using her merely as a trigger for his own internal monologue.
This concept of the imagined object leads to what might be the most fascinating part of this entire exploration. The argument asserts that trans women occupy a uniquely powerful position in exposing this exact dynamic. They make the arbitrariness of this fantasy impossible to ignore.
Right, because trans women bring what the text describes as a doubled experience to the table, which is an incredibly rich intellectual and experiential resource.
What does that doubled experience mean exactly?
It means living under two entirely different sets of societal assumptions. So experiencing the world first through the expectations placed on one gender and then through the expectations placed on another. It produces a quality of perception that is remarkably rare.
Always.
It allows someone to see the matrix of social conditioning in a way that most people who only ever experience one set of rules simply cannot perceive.
So trans women are bringing all of this insight, all of this doubled experience to their interactions. Let's set up the specific scenario the essay uses to highlight the collapse of the objectifier's logic.
Okay.
Imagine a man is interacting with a trans woman who presents as fully feminine. They're having a fantastic time. She is providing the emotional intelligence, the humor, the somatic presence we talked about. Their mirror neurons are firing. Their nervous systems are co-regulating.
The physiological connection is absolutely real and happening in the moment.
Exactly. But then, the moment her specific anatomy becomes known, the man experiences a sudden, intense wave of revulsion and betrayal.
This raises an important question, though. We have to analyze the source of that revulsion. Absolutely nothing about the person sitting across the table changed in that split second.
Right. Her humor didn't evaporate.
Her emotional depth didn't disappear. The physiological co-regulation she was providing to his nervous system a minute ago didn't suddenly unhappen. The only thing that changed was a piece of new information about her body. Information that, frankly, was completely irrelevant to the actual conversation they were having.
Oh, why the panic? Because, if I order a steak and the waiter brings me chicken, I might be annoyed that my preference wasn't met, sure. But I don't go into a state of existential panic or violent revulsion. The intensity of the reaction completely exceeds what this situation calls for.
The text argues the panic occurs because the hologram shattered. The revulsion proves definitively that the man was never actually responding to her. He was responding to his own mental image, his own projected fantasy.
And when that image was corrected by reality?
The entire perceived value of the interaction collapsed for him, which tells us the value was never located in her at all. It was entirely contained within his projection.
Let me try a different analogy here to explain the panic, because my steak and chicken thing doesn't quite capture the emotional stakes the author is talking about.
Yeah, it's a bit deeper than dinner.
Right. It's more like this. Imagine a guy who uses a mirror every single day to flex, to assure himself that he is this tough, stoic, completely self-sufficient guy who doesn't need anyone. But one day, he leans in close and realizes it's not a mirror at all. It's a two-way window.
Oh, wow.
And someone is standing on the other side looking right back at him, seeing all the vulnerability and softness he's terrified of. The hostility isn't about the window. It's about the terror of being exposed.
That is a brilliant way to frame it, and it perfectly transitions into the deep psychological explanation the text offers for why this broken projection results in hostility. The core argument here is that a man's hostility toward a trans woman in this scenario is actually a mirror of his fear of his own internal femininity.
So what does this all mean? Let's unpack the mechanics of that. He's mad at his own internal femininity. How does that work?
It is the ultimate tragedy of the cost of reduction. The author points out that many men are socialized from a very young age to fear their own capacity for softness, for vulnerability, and for emotional receptivity.
Their goal to man up.
Exactly. They are taught to aggressively expel those qualities from their own identities, to project them entirely onto women, and then to try and control those qualities by gaining sexual access to women. They essentially outsource their own emotional regulation and then try to own the external source.
So when a trans woman simply exists, Living her truth and embodying femininity, she inadvertently demonstrates a terrifying reality to the objectifier. Femininity is not a biological destiny.
Right.
It's an internal quality. It is a way of being in the world that anyone can inhabit.
And for a man who has spent his entire life aggressively policing his own internal softness, building walls to keep it out, this demonstration is deeply existentially threatening.
Because it implies a freedom that he has been refusing.
Exactly. It implies that the exact qualities he has been desperately seeking outside of himself, the softness, the receptivity, the deep connection, were actually available to him internal all along. He didn't need to conquer anyone to feel them.
That concept from the text, that the hostility is the distance between him and that realization, that gives me absolute chills. He is furious because he is looking at a living, breathing representation of his own massive self-denial.
It is a profound paradox. If this man could just cross that internal distance, if he could encounter and honor the feminine within himself, even a fraction of an amount, he would suddenly become capable of genuine relationship.
He'd stop starving in the kitchen.
He really would. He would be able to connect with cis women, with trans women, and perhaps most importantly, with himself.
But because he refuses to do that, because he relies entirely on reducing people to functions, he is actively making genuine contact structurally impossible. Like, you cannot reduce someone to an object and then also be genuinely emotionally affected by them. The intimacy he is so desperately pursuing through sexual access is completely foreclosed by his very method of pursuit.
He is trying to enter a house to find warmth and connection, but he is using a method that permanently seals the door from the outside. No woman can give him the felt sense of worthiness he is seeking, because what he is really seeking is mutual recognition. And you are fundamentally incapable of being recognized if you refuse to recognize the humanity in the person sitting across from you.
That perfectly summarizes the tragic irony of this entire piece.
Huh?
As we wrap up this deep dive, I want to circle back to the quote we started with, because this framework totally shifts how we hear it. When a man communicates, "I'm only here because of what is between your legs," he thinks he is setting the terms of the engagement, but he's actually telling the truth in a way he didn't intend.
He is making a confession. He is admitting that a singular body part is literally the only thing his impoverished inner world is capable of perceiving.
All the history, the doubled experience, the intelligence, the relational genius, the physiological co-regulation that the person brings to the room, it is completely invisible to him. It bounces right off his armor. The conclusion here is that this is not a statement about a woman's limitations or her worth. It is a precise, devastating description of the man's profound limitations.
Which serves as a powerful call to evaluate how we all encounter each other, regardless of gender. Encountering people as whole, complex beings isn't just about being polite or, politically correct. It is quite literally the only way to access genuine neurological co-regulation, to foster emotional growth, and to experience the profound relief of truly being seen in this world.
It fundamentally changes how you view a simple conversation. And I want to leave you, our listener, with a final thought to mull over as you go about your day. We spent a lot of time on the biological mechanics today. The fact that our nervous systems literally sync up and regulate stress hormones through authentic, non-transactional human contact.
We are built to heal each other through presence.
Right. We require that physiological syncing to maintain our baseline health. So, if that is an inescapable biological reality, how might the modern world's massive shift toward increasingly transactional relationships be affecting us at scale?
Oh, that's a scary thought.
Think about the architecture of dating apps, the rise of aggressive networking, the gig economy where every interaction is purely functional and everyone is just a means to an end. How might this constant reduction of human beings to utilities be invisibly shaping our collective physical health?
Are we slowly raising the baseline anxiety and cortisol levels of society over generations?
Exactly. Simply because we've forgotten how to just sit in a room, drop our agendas, and recognize the whole person in front of us without needing anything from them. It's definitely something to think about the next time you catch yourself running a background process on the people around you. Until next time, keep digging deeper.